Last year, at this same dinner table, my father raised his glass to toast my siblings' accomplishments, then turned to me and said, "And Natalie? Well, she's still figuring things out." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. That's what you do when you're the family's disappointment. Tonight, I showed up again, on time, in my usual plain dress, driving the same old sedan. Nothing about me looked different, and that's exactly how I wanted it. Because while they were busy planning inheritance distributions and Ivy League engagements, I was building a logistics AI company from a borrowed storage unit, and this week, we hit a 100 million valuation, but I hadn't told them. Not yet. I thought I'd stay quiet. Until my assistant called me at the table and used one word none of them had ever associated with me before: CEO. Growing up in the Brooks household meant living under constant comparison. My older brother, Daniel, was a golden child from the moment he could spell Harvard. He won debate championships in middle school, interned for senators by 16, and graduated magna cum laude from Yale before heading straight to Georgetown Law. My parents adored him. He spoke their language: law, legacy, power. Then came Emily, the perfect political daughter, charming, calculating, photogenic. She studied international relations at Brown and now works as a communications director for a rising congresswoman. Mom says Emily's voice was born for press conferences. I think it was trained for them. And then there was me. Natalie, the one who used to take apart the family toaster just to see how it worked. The one who built her first inventory tracking app during a high school summer job at a flower shop. I wasn't rebellious, just uninterested in the script everyone else seemed to follow. My parents didn't understand me, and after a while, they stopped trying. They tolerated my interest in logistics, the way people tolerate a neighbor's ugly dog, silently judging, occasionally polite, and always secretly wishing it would go away. When I told them I'd chosen Carnegie Mellon for undergrad, they blinked in confusion. "That's a science school, isn't it?" my mother asked, as if I'd announced I was going to circus camp. At family events, I was introduced as Natalie. She's in, tech, I think? No one asked what I actually did. No one wanted to know. But that's not the part that hurt. What hurt was knowing that no matter how hard I worked or how far I went, I would never be celebrated in the Brooks household the way Daniel or Emily were. Their paths were paved with polished expectations. Mine was a gravel road I had to map myself. Even now, walking into the family's estate in coastal Maine for our annual holiday gathering, I felt it again, that quiet, familiar weight pressing on my chest. The ancestral paintings, the marble floors, the way everyone greeted each other like a campaign event. The Brooks name meant something here. It opened doors. It got you invited to galas, to boardrooms, to legacy law firms. But for me, it had always meant one thing. You don't belong. I didn't come tonight to belong. I came because I wanted to see how they'd react, not to what I said, but to what they never saw coming. And maybe, just maybe, I came for that girl inside me who once believed she'd have to earn their love with a perfect resume. She's gone now. But I thought she deserved to witness what happens when the family underdog builds her own throne. The first time I truly understood how alone I was in this family wasn't at a dinner table. It was at my MIT graduation. I stood in a sea of black caps and smiling families, clutching a diploma I'd fought like hell to earn, double major in systems engineering and applied analytics, 4 GPA, published thesis on predictive logistics modeling. My name was called, the auditorium clapped, and when I looked up to the balcony where families were waving and cheering, my row was empty. Daniel had an overseas political summit. Emily was helping with a Senate fundraiser. My parents? They were in Martha's Vineyard for a gala hosted by one of Dad's old law partners. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart," Mom had texted that morning, followed by a photo of her dress. It's funny, people talk about defining moments as loud, dramatic things, but that moment wasn't loud. It was silent. It didn't break me, but it shifted something permanently. It taught me not to wait for their applause. After graduation, I landed a job at a mid-sized distribution tech firm in Ohio. It wasn't glamorous, but it taught me more than any textbook. I watched warehouses fall apart because no one understood how to route delivery trucks during snowstorms. I watched hospital equipment arrive 2 days late because a GPS system didn't account for construction delays. I started keeping a notebook, ideas, frustrations, algorithms I wanted to try. No one in my family ever asked what I was working on. At Thanksgiving, Dad asked if I'd figured out what I wanted to be yet. Emily suggested I consider public policy. You'd be great at logistics, for political campaigns. I laughed and said I preferred real-world chaos over political theater. They laughed too, but not in a good way. By then, I'd already written the first lines of code for a prototype I was calling Swift Routea machine learning system, designed to predict last-mile delivery disruptions based on real-time data inputs like weather, local traffic, and historical route inefficiencies. It wasn't flashy, but it was smart, and it worked. At night, I coded. On weekends, I tested it by volunteering with a local food bank's delivery program, optimizing their drop-off routes so meals reached seniors on time. No one paid me for it, but something inside me clicked. I wasn't chasing prestige. I was solving something real. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the Brooks disappointment. I felt necessary. That was the beginning of the idea, of the separation, of building a life that might never be seen by my family, but would someday be undeniable. Because if I couldn't inherit the Brooks legacy, I would build a new one. One delivery, one line of code, one quiet step at a time. I kept going to the family gatherings. Not because I wanted to, but because some stubborn part of me still believed, maybe just maybe this time would be different. It never was. Every Christmas, we returned to the same colonial estate in coastal Maine. It looked like something out of an Architectural Digest spread. White pillars, lake view, dining room with portraits of ancestors who probably signed things with quill pens. It was a place built for legacy, and I was treated like a glitch in the lineage. At dinner, Daniel would hold court, regaling everyone with political gossip and his latest podcast appearance. Emily updated us on her boss's rising poll numbers, how she'd rewritten a campaign speech 2 minutes before airtime, and saved the candidate's image. My parents beamed like proud patrons of the American elite. Then the spotlight would inevitably turn to me. "So, Natalie," Uncle Richard once asked, swirling his wine, "you still deliver things?" That year, I had just secured our first enterprise contract with a national medical supply chain. But I simply smiled and nodded. "Yep, still delivering." Mom chimed in. "She's very hands-on. You know, boots on the ground. It's noble." Noble. As if I'd joined the Peace Corps instead of co-developing a routing engine that reduced delivery failures by 32%. I didn't correct them. Not anymore. What was the point? Every time I tried to explain what SwiftRoute did, someone changed the subject, or worse, gave me that blank, polite nod that said, "We stopped listening 2 seconds in." So I started wearing the same navy blue cardigan to every event. Kept the 2010 Honda, brought mid-tier wine, nothing flashy. The less remarkable I appeared, the less they'd prod. Emily once leaned over during brunch and whispered, "You should really think about branding, Nat. People take you more seriously when you look expensive." I wanted to ask her if she thought engineers came in gold foil. Instead, I nodded and bit into my scone. It was easier to play the part they'd assigned me, the eccentric one, the quiet one, the family errand girl, who liked working with vans and numbers. Let them think I was harmless. Because the truth was, I wasn't harmless. I was building something they didn't understand. And someday, they would. But not because I demanded their attention. No, I would make them listen the only way the Brooks family knew how. By becoming undeniable. And the moment was coming soon. The dinner began like they all did, performative and exhausting. We gathered in the chandelier-lit dining room of the estate, seated by hierarchy, not affection. My father at one end, my mother at the other. Daniel to his right, Emily to her left. Me, down the table with the floral arrangement partially blocking my view, like always. The first course was sea bass flown in from somewhere that sounded expensive. Everyone made the appropriate noises of approval. Emily announced she'd been invited to a White House roundtable. Daniel mentioned polling numbers and some senator's extramarital scandal. Mother dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a cloth napkin and smiled like a first lady at a charity ball. Then, halfway through the main course, my father cleared his throat, the Brooks signal for attention. We wanted to take a moment to talk about some updates to the family's financial structure, he began, swirling his Bordeaux. I felt my stomach tense. Emily straightened. Daniel folded his hands in visible anticipation. With Daniel preparing to run for Congress, my father continued, and Emily's impressive strides in the political sphere, your mother and I felt it was time to begin distributing certain trust assets. He raised his glass to Daniel. The Nantucket property will be placed under your name by January. Then turned to Emily. Your education fund has been converted into a long-term asset portfolio. You'll find the details with our advisor. They both beamed. Toasts followed. Applause. I kept eating in silence, but I knew what was coming. The pause. The shift in tone. The tightening of my mother's jaw. And Natalie, my father said, finally facing me, his voice soft and diplomatic, like a man delivering disappointing stock news. We've decided it's best to withhold any major allocations until there's more clarity around your professional path. Clarity. He said it like I was a fog. My mother added quickly, this isn't about punishment, darling. We just think it's time you made some more traditional decisions. Something stable. And visible? Daniel chimed in, ever the tactician. Your work isn't really public. It's hard for the advisors to evaluate. Emily sipped her wine. It's probably for the best. Startups are risky. I swallowed, not the food, but the fury. They had rehearsed this. They had made a coordinated decision to erase me financially in front of linen napkins and creme brulee. I placed my fork down, deliberately. Just so I understand, I said calmly. You're cutting me off from the trust because I haven't followed the family template? Not cutting off, my mother replied, twisting her wedding band. Just pausing things. No vacation property, no family fund stake, no access to resources, I listed. But not cutting off? Silence. The room held its breath, waiting for me to break. I didn't. Instead, I smiled. Understood. Then my phone began to buzz in my lap. And everything changed. The phone buzzed again, harder this time twice, then 3 times in quick succession. That wasn't normal. I glanced down. Alicia Thompson. Work. My COO. My right hand. My emergency-only contact during family events. I stood slowly. Excuse me for a moment, I said, rising from my seat with practiced politeness. My father exhaled, annoyed by the breach of dining etiquette. Really, Natalie? But I was already stepping toward the doorway, phone pressed to my ear. Alicia? I whispered. Her voice came through crisp and loud enough for the room to hear every word. Natalie, SoftBank, just confirmed. 40 million. The wire is in. The valuation's official. 100 million pre-IPO. Silence exploded behind me. I turned halfway, still holding the phone. Wait, Alicia continued, unaware she now had a live audience. Goldman wants to finalize the Series B press release tonight. Also, your Forbes interview for the top 30 under 30 founders is locked for Monday. And, she paused, the Tokyo team's asking if you're ready to expand into Asia next quarter. Every chair creaked as my family sat frozen. I nodded, eyes steady on the chandelier. That's fantastic news. Let's schedule a team call in the morning. Tell Goldman I'll send over my final notes tonight. Got it, CEO, Alicia said cheerfully. Talk soon. I ended the call and turned back to the room. My father's glass hovered midair, wine forgotten. My mother's fork had stopped halfway to her mouth. Daniel blinked, trying to process. Emily had the expression of someone watching a car accident in slow motion. I walked calmly back to my seat. The quiet was a living thing. Then Aunt Claire, bless her, the only one in the family with a spine, and a soul broke the silence with a laugh that rang like glass. "Well," she said, raising her champagne flute, "I think that deserves a real toast." I met her eyes. She winked. My mother recovered first. "Natalie," she said, voice breathy, sugar slick. "Darling, why didn't you tell us?" My father leaned forward. "SoftBank? As in, SoftBank? And Goldman's involved?" Emily blinked rapidly. "You're a CEO?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took a long sip of wine, let it linger. Then I smiled. "I thought you said startups were risky." No one laughed this time. For a moment, no one said a word. Then, as if on cue, they all tried to talk at once. My father leaned forward, his tone shifting from dismissive to suddenly attentive. "Natalie, we should have had this conversation earlier. If you'd told us your company was doing so well, we could have coordinated a family investment, perhaps even helped you scale faster." "Help me scale." The man who just 20 minutes ago cut me off from the family trust now wanted in. Daniel jumped in. "Goldman Sachs, that's real. That gives you weight. We could position this as a Brooks Family Innovation Initiative. I have donors who'd love a tech-forward story to attach to." Emily wasn't far behind. "We're organizing a healthcare reform panel next month. Brian Me Boss would love to feature you. We could brand your work as part of the campaign's forward-looking agenda. It's perfect. Perfect. For them. Not for me." My mother, always the strategist, placed a hand lightly over mine. "Sweetheart, I know we've been cautious, but you have to understand we were worried about you. Startups fail. We didn't want you to get hurt." I looked at her hand. Perfect nails. Wedding ring gleaming. The same hand that helped sign me out of the family trust hours earlier. I slid mine away gently. "You were worried," I repeated. "That's funny, because no one's asked how I'm doing in years. You weren't worried about me. You were embarrassed by me." Their faces tightened. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "You've spent a decade minimizing everything I do. You laughed when I said I was building software. You called it a hobby. You told people I was between jobs even when I was leading a logistics transformation pilot across 10 states. Daniel cleared his throat. "Come on, Nat. You know we were just teasing." "No," I said calmly. "You were diminishing me. Because it made you feel more comfortable." They shifted in their chairs. "And now that you know there's money involved suddenly, I'm not embarrassing anymore. Now I'm a strategic asset." Emily looked genuinely hurt. "That's not fair. We've always believed in you." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "Name my company." Silence. I gave them a moment. No one spoke. "It's SwiftRoute," I said. "We optimize last-mile delivery for medical supply chains using AI predictive modeling. We currently operate in 27 states, with 213 distribution partners and a 96% fulfillment success rate." My father blinked. "That's impressive." "Yes," I said. "It is." He straightened, slipping back into boardroom mode. "Well then, we should revisit your position in the trust. Clearly the situation has evolved." "No," I replied, voice sharp as a scalpel. "Nothing's evolved in the last 20 minutes except your perception of me." "You're overreacting," my mother said softly. "No, I'm responding. There's a difference." Daniel opened his mouth again, but I held up a hand. "Let me be clear. I'm not looking for a family stake, or board seats, or political co-branding. SwiftRoute is fully funded. Our board is full. Our investors believe in our vision because they saw it before it was valuable." Emily's lips tightened. "So what now, we're not part of your success story?" I looked at her, then at the table. At the crystal, the silverware, the people who had never once made room for me until the room was full of money. "You're not part of this story," I said, "because you didn't want to be when it actually mattered." Then I stood. "I have a team call in the morning. Real stakeholders, real believers. So if you'll excuse me." "Wait," my father said, rising halfway from his chair. "We should talk this through." "We did," I said, walking toward the door. "Over Seabase and betrayal." As I reached the hallway, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Alicia. Forbes cover confirmed. Tokyo expansion greenlit. Congrats, CEO. I smiled, tucked the phone into my clutch, and didn't look back. The day after the dinner, I didn't answer anyone's calls. Not Daniel's carefully worded text. Let's chat soon, lots of exciting crossover potential. Not Emily's voicemail. We should reset. You know I've always admired your drive. Not even my father's email titled simply, discussion proposal. But I did respond to one message. Alicia had sent me a rough draft of our press release. SwiftRoot's 100 million valuation, the expansion into Japan, and a short paragraph at the end that I had quietly asked for. We're proud to announce the launch of the Brooks Foundation, a $5 million initiative supporting young women in supply chain tech, especially those from underrepresented communities. That was the only time the Brooks name would appear in the press release, and this time, it was on my terms. I chose the name not to honor my family, but to reclaim it. For years, Brooks had been a name that excluded me from trust funds, family investments, and dinner table conversations. Now it would open doors for girls like me, girls who didn't look the part, didn't talk the part, but saw systems and patterns and believed they could fix things. We held the announcement event at our Boston headquarters. No grand ballroom, no political guests. Just the SwiftRoot team, a few local educators, and a group of high school girls from underserved schools who had been invited to tour our logistics floor. I watched their faces light up as engineers showed them how we modeled delivery failures, how data could move medicine, how algorithms could change outcomes. That night, after the event, I got a text from my mother. We read about your foundation. That's extraordinary, Natalie. Would you consider letting the family host a fundraiser for it at the Vineyard House? I stared at the screen for a long time. It was the first time she had called my work extraordinary. But still host a fundraiser? At the house they excluded me from? I didn't respond. Instead, I took a cab to a small flower shop on the edge of Cambridge. The owner, Mrs. Reed, still remembered May, her former summer intern who once redesigned her inventory system in exchange for day-old muffins. She was the first person to believe I wasn't just good with computers, but someone who could fix real-world problems. I handed her an envelope with instructions and a business card. The next day, a bouquet of white lilies was delivered to the Brooks estate, addressed to my mother. The card read, "Thank you for your offer. The foundation already has a venue or warehouse. The one where I built everything you once called a phase. Warmly, Natalie." A month after the foundation launch, I was invited to speak at a public high school in Baltimorean all-girls STEM academy, tucked between auto shops and boarded-up warehouses. They didn't roll out a red carpet, no camera crews, just a folding chair, a modest auditorium, and 50 girls with notebooks and sharp eyes. I told them about SwiftRoot, about the years I coded in a garage while delivering pizza to pay for server space. I told them about logistics failures that delayed insulin shipments, and how fixing those failures meant saving real lives. Not building apps for social validation, but building systems that move the world. Afterward, during the Q&A, a girl in the second row raised her hand. She couldn't have been older than 15. She had braids, chipped nail polish, and a determined stare that reminded me too much of my younger self. "My parents think logistics is for truck drivers," she said. "They want me to be a doctor, or a lawyer, something serious. Did your family support you?" I hesitated. The truth hung like dust in the stage light. "No," I said finally. "They didn't. Not at first, not when it mattered." She looked down, like I'd confirmed her worst fear. But I continued. "What I learned is, sometimes the people closest to us can't see us, not because we're invisible, but because they only recognize reflections of themselves." The auditorium went still. "You don't have to fight them," I added. "You just have to build something they can't deny, something so real, so yours, that their understanding becomes irrelevant." She nodded, slowly, and I knew she got it. Afterward, a teacher gave me a gift, a mug that read, Shipping confidence since 2023. I laughed harder than I had in weeks. That night, back in my loft, I stood by the window and looked out over Boston Harbor. My phone buzzed again. A missed call from Daniel. A voicemail from my mother. We were thinking about a holiday gathering. Would love to see you. No pressure, of course. Emily had texted, Brian's campaign would still love your support. Even just a quote for our healthcare platform. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened an envelope on my kitchen counter. Inside were hand-drawn thank you cards from the students in Baltimore. One simply said, "Thank you for proving that a girl like me can run the whole system." I tucked it into my desk drawer, right next to the trust fund letter that said I was being excluded. One piece of paper erased me. The other reminded me that I exist in ways that matter far more. A few days later, I hosted a quiet dinner for my team at the warehouse office where it all began. No press, no gala, just the people who believed from the start. As everyone left, Alicia handed me one last delivery. A bouquet of peonies. No card. Just a look between us, an understanding. I placed them by the window, next to a photo of that warehouse in its earliest days. Concrete floor, cardboard desks, no heat, no furniture. Just vision. That's what I built. Not a company. A legacy. Mine.